Nikolai Vasilievich Gogol was a Russian writer of Ukrainian origin. He was born in 1809 in Veliki Sorochintsy, the son of Vasily Gogolyanovsky and Maria Kosyarovska, and attended the Higher Art School in Nizhin. In 1828 he came to St. Petersburg, publishing a romantic poem, Hans Kuchelgarten, at his own expense and under a pen name, and sent it to magazines who mocked it incessantly. Gogol then bought all copies and destroyed them, vowing to never write poetry again. In 1831 his first collection of Ukrainian stories, Evenings on a Farm near Dikanka, was published and was a success. At the same time, his appointment to the history department at St. Vladimir Imperial University in Kiev, despite support from Pushkin and Sergei Uvarov, was blocked due to bureaucratic reasons. In 1834 he became professor of medieval history at the University of St. Petersburg. A catastrophe, his lack of qualification or knowledge about the subject made him skip lectures and pretend to have a toothache, so another professor conducted the final examination, while Gogol sat with a handkerchief wrapped around his head in the background. His greatly successful play, The Government Inspector, being a satire of small-town government bureaucracy, would not have been permitted by censorship until Emperor Nicholas I personally demanded it be performed. His unfinished Dead Souls, whose last part he burned before his death, brought him even more success, but spiritual elder Matvei Konstantinovsky convinced him of the sinfulness of his works, so he destroyed his manuscripts and so damaged his health by asceticism that he died shortly after in 1852 in Moscow. Today we will review the 1916 collection of his fantastic work, The Mantle and Other Stories. The Mantle, ironically dealing with a cloak that it never even calls a mantle, concerns a petty bureau copyist, Akaki Akakievich, whose only joy in life is copying official documents, and who takes no care of himself or of the world around him. But one day he notices the ruinous state of his cloak, which is especially bad given the winter in Moscow is not known to be very mild. So he saves up, going short on food and coal for many months, before his cloak is finally made, only to be stolen in the street on the first night he has worn it. Going from official to official trying to recover his cloak, he is sent to the devil by a very self-important superintendent, and developing a fever from wandering the streets, dies shortly after, only for his ghost to accost officials in the streets and steal their cloaks, until finally getting one from the superintendent himself. Sadly, the tragic atmosphere of the story prior to his death was far better than his brief and not very satisfying stint as a revenant. The Nose is a fairly popular Gogol story, but I didn't much care for it. In brief, Kovalov of the municipal committee loses his nose overnight, and it appears baked into the bread eaten by his barber Yakovlevich. It is never explained how it did so, nor how it came back to his face one day, nor how or why it went around town disguised as a state councillor. This one did not really work for me. But Memoirs of a Madman is a different story. Poprishchin is a penniless noble and petty office worker who loves his director's daughter. But finding out she is to be married, he goes crazy and believes he is the King of Spain, his unwinding psyche being evident in his loose grasp of time. Using dates such as April 43rd of the year 2000, March Ember 86, or simply stating the day had no date. A May night concerns Levko the Cossack, trying to get the better of his father the headman who wants to marry Levko's sweetheart. This part of the story is forgettable, but there is a good story of a witch forcing her stepdaughter into ruin and suicide and being pursued by her after death. The V has seminarist Koma Brut of the Bratsky monastery in Kiev meet a witch one day while with his friends, who proceeds to ride him like a horse through the sky. Then, after freeing himself and beating her with a stick, he is summoned by her father to pray over her body for 3 days, but loses his life on the 3rd day in the presence of the V, the terrifying king of gnomes, whose eyelids reach to the floor, in a church full of misshapen demons. This being the best story in the book by far.